self-generation customer is consuming their own generation. And also, as we discussed in our response, when a self-generation customer consumes their own generation on site, they are not using BC Hydro's distribution and transmission system to transport that unit of electricity to their premises. So that is an avoided cost to BC Hydro. But when a community generator or shared generating facility is generating, they are not physically connected to their benefiting customers. The benefiting customers' consumption still utilizes BC Hydro's system. There's no avoided cost there. So BC Hydro's proposal on applying the 10 cents per kilowatt hour energy price to all net generation from the shared generating facility is to provide the avoided cost benefit to BC Hydro of that unit of electricity that they generate.
So I'm going to go back up a second to make sure I understand this. I said, I put your quote, benefiting customers are not physically connected to a shared generating facility and accordingly cannot avoid paying the retail rate. Accordingly means a logical consequence, which, correct?
Correct.
But a technical solution does exist.
Yes, so I think what we were referring to when we said a technical solution existed is, as we understand what other jurisdictions have done, and I think what we understand EcoSmart is proposing in this proceeding is a system, for example, like we understand they have in California, which is called a timestamp approach, where they say for apartment buildings, okay, we have these benefiting customers in this apartment complex. They all have separate accounts. They are benefiting customers or subscribers of this generating facility that is associated in some way with this apartment complex. And so even though physically that consumption of these individual apartment accounts is not being offset by this community generating facility, they're connected up differently, we can construct a system in which we can look at the generation, we can look at the consumption, and we can sync those things up, and we can assign the retail rate value to that synced up generation and consumption for those customer accounts. And so the point we were making was, yes, that is technically feasible. BC Hydro could do something similar here. The reason that we haven't proposed to do that goes back to the response that was referenced to EcoSmart IR 1.1.1, which is that if we were to do that, that would assign a retail electricity rate value, that bundled service value, to that kilowatt hour of energy that community generator customer is generating, and it would overcompensate those customers for that generation. And so our position would be that that's inappropriate. Now, to be fair, that it could be argued that is what's happening under net billing, where an individual self-generating customer is offsetting their consumption behind the meter. And so what we described in our response to EcoSmart IR 1.1.1 is, yes, there is a difference here between how subscribers on 2290 are being treated versus customers on rate schedule 2289 are being treated. But to resolve that difference, we would either need to overcompensate for the generation by giving it that retail electricity rate value, or we would need to replace our net billing proposal with a buy all sell all proposal. And we've talked about why we think net billing is the right balance. And so that was why, on balance, we felt that leaving that difference as is was preferable to either of those alternative solutions.
So a quick question, and then I will turn to 1.1.1. But the limitation, a technical solution exists. For a variety of reasons, it's not one that you feel is feasible right now, and that's an issue that we'll address in due course. This limitation, though, however, again, is an administrative It's administrative or policy-based, not technical. There is a technical solution in this case. BC Hydro has chosen not to implement virtual offsetting, correct? That's a choice.
Yes, I agree. It's a policy choice. Again, I think with regards to the term virtual offsetting, I would say that that has different meanings depending on who you ask, but I agree, yes, it is a policy choice we've made.
Now, on page 651, later, BC Hydro states eliminating this difference between 289 and 2290 would require either modifying RS 2289 to incorporate cost reflective rate design modifications or a buy all sell all mechanism, or modifying RS 2290 to deem some exports to the grid to be valued at the retail rate. Those are your words again.
Yes.
So in this case, BC Hydro presents two options: modifying RS 2289 or valuing grid exports at retail rates. Did EcoSmart propose either of those?
I believe so, and obviously feel free to correct me if you don't agree, but I would liken EcoSmart's proposal to the alternative of valuing the generation at the retail rate.
Okay, we'll come back to that in our testimony later on. Because EcoSmart has proposed a third option, virtual offsetting, allowing subscribers to offset their retail consumption when it coincides with their allocated generation. Correct?
Yes, I think that would be
Now,
a fair summary.
In October, BC Hydro argues that EcoSmart's proposal is inappropriate by referring to the BC Hydro response that was given in June to their response IR 1.1.1, where they analyzed two options EcoSmart didn't propose. Accordingly, in October, when referring to the response to IR 1.1.1, BC Hydro is ignoring the option EcoSmart actually proposed. Is that not accurate?
I wouldn't agree. The alternative that we discussed in EcoSmart IR 1.1.1, to say that is there's an alternative where instead of valuing generation at the energy price of 10 cents per kilowatt hour, we would value it at the benefiting customer or the subscriber's retail electricity rate. And what we were conveying in that alternative was, I think what we understand EcoSmart has proposed, which is, if I understand EcoSmart's proposal correctly, EcoSmart has proposed a setup where we would look at what a benefiting customer is consuming, we would look at what a community generator customer is generating, and we would sync those up. And where there is that match, we would say, okay, that is akin to what is happening with a regular net metering customer behind the meter, as Ms. Cho talked about. And so we're going to value it at the retail rate. And so that concept we described, I think is what EcoSmart is suggesting. And so that's why we referred back to that response, because we felt that it captured that alternative.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have an opportunity for our expert witness to try and clarify this for the commission, Mr. Chairman. Now, I have one more topic. When BC Hydro pays a community generator avoided cost compensation for energy exported, I covered this. I did. Yeah, I covered that. Thank you. I'm finished for now.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Bear.
Next in the order of cross-examination is the Community Solar Coalition.
Thank you, panel. Bunch of questions here. Just some basic rate schedule facts. We might have gone through some of this already, but I'll blaze through it.
That's great. And I also invite the panel to say if you've already answered a question rather than answering it again. Thank you.
So BC Hydro currently has one distributed generation rate, which is RS 1289, correct?
Yes.
And in this application, they're proposing two new rates.
Yes.
So that's 2289 and 2290.
Yes.
So 2289 and 2290 are net billing structures that compensate exports at a fixed price, not the retail rate.
Yes.
I think we understand that. So this is about inflation and payback asymmetry. Under 1289, exported energy is credited at the retail rate, which typically rises over time, correct?
Yes.
So 1289 customers remain relatively inflation neutral because of these rises in the rates.
I think that would depend on the rate increases relative to inflation, but generally, yes.
Thank you. And under RS 2289, the export rate is fixed and doesn't adjust annually for inflation, correct?
That's correct.
But RS 2289 also has a DSM rebate to maintain a target payback period.
I wouldn't put it that way. The rebate is independent of the rate schedule. So
Yeah,
yes, there is a rebate, but it's not part of the rate schedule.
but there's been a justification in the application to keep the payback periods the same.
I wouldn't describe it as a justification. The rebate is something BC Hydro had been exploring for some time. It was first a resource option we considered in our 2021 integrated resource plan. So yes, the rebate, when considered alongside rate schedule 2289, achieves approximately the same average payback period as rate schedule 1289, the net metering rate. But BC Hydro did not introduce the rebate simply to achieve that outcome.
So it's just there as an illustration.
Yes.
If the retail rates rise, BC Hydro may reduce the rebate to maintain that target or not.
No, I don't think the rebate being moved up or down would be influenced necessarily by the retail rate. I think that BC Hydro would have considerations that would inform the rebate in future, which we've talked about in our evidence, such as participation levels and so forth. But I don't think the retail electricity rate would necessarily be one of those.
So do RS 1289 customers have any inflation protection over that 5 years? Or whenever the rate next?
Sorry, I
rate
think you
design
mean
comes?
2289?
Yeah.
So no, we do not propose escalating the energy price for net generation by inflation, and there's a couple reasons for that. The first goes back to the point we made in our response to BCUC IR 1.3.4.1 in Exhibit B13, and it goes back to that point of pushing the price to the top of the value stack. If we're inflating the price, then that's essentially what we're doing. Even though a customer may have already made an investment decision at an earlier time based on the economics that existed then. The other point that I would make is that well, we haven't considered the cost of service to the customer. This is all about the utility benefit value to BC Hydro. I think it is useful to make the point that the issue of whether or not energy prices should be inflated to account for customer costs is something that's been canvassed in BC Hydro's context previously. BC Hydro did at one point escalate electricity purchase agreements by inflation. That is by full inflation. That is not something that we do any longer. We do in the 2024 call for power escalate by 30%, but that 30% is strictly for the operations and maintenance costs of the EPA, not for the capital cost. And I think in the case of individual solar customers, the bulk of their costs would be capital. I wouldn't expect that an individual solar customer would have much in the way of operations and maintenance.
Thank you. So you're talking about value stack and O&M in relation to energy purchases. And my question is that appropriate for a retail rate? Are we expecting retail customers, homeowners, small businesses to have the same sophistication as an energy manager for like a corporation who's pursuing a business contract with BC Hydro to supply power? I think this might be more for your other team, but just in general, I mean, is there equivalency between like a commercial energy producer and a homeowner or a renter under 2290 in your view?
Sorry, I might have missed it. An equivalency between a renter or homeowner as opposed to
An IPP.
No, I would say those are different.
In just the sophistication to understand, comprehend things like value stack and.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. There's a difference in sophistication there. I guess what I would say is when we're setting the energy price for net generation, we're not really looking at the relative sophistication of the different actors. We're really trying to, as I said, find an appropriate utility benefit value. So that's the basis of our determination, not the relative sophistication of the parties.
So a simple rate for a retail customer is, or based on simple metrics, isn't really that important.
I wouldn't say it's not important. I think it absolutely is a consideration. I think this goes back to some of the discussion earlier where, you know, if you look at the Bond-Bright principles, for example, there's considerations around fairness and there's consideration around customer understanding. And so I can take the point that perhaps for customers with self-generation, net billing is not as easily understandable compensation mechanism as net metering. I wouldn't necessarily debate or dispute that, but I think we're weighing that against other considerations such as fairness. And in our view, net billing is a much more fair mechanism of compensation. And so when considered together, we think the proposal we've made appropriately balances those things.
And the application to shift the inflation risk from DG customers under 1289. Sorry. I don't think that's worded very well. So 2289 and 2290 don't have that same inflation risk. So BC Hydro is having the customers sort of eat that inflation risk.
I guess it depends on what you mean by inflation risk. If I consider an example of a customer who enrolls on rate schedule 2289 next year and they've installed their facility, I wouldn't expect that customer would have much inflation risk. They've installed their facility, they've spent their capital costs, and so their cost is spent. It is what it is at that stage. Now, is there some operations and maintenance costs and so forth that customer may incur throughout the life of that generating facility? I imagine there may be some, but I think it's probably fair to say that the bulk of those costs that the customer put in for that facility are expended at that particular moment in time and not subject to inflation risk in future periods.
I think we have, I think I need to make inflation risk a little clearer here. So if I have the choice between building a system under 1289 and 2289, under 1289, my payback period is going to be different because the value of that generation is going to be relatively inflation adjusted over time. So that's what I mean by inflation risk. One rate that we currently have has a built-in inflation mechanism. The other, it doesn't. So one has a different risk than the other.
So I think that's true, but a couple caveats. One, I wouldn't agree that 2289 has no inflation mechanism in terms of customer payback. It does in terms of the consumption that a customer is offsetting behind the meter. That customer is realizing the retail rate for anything they're offsetting behind the meter, and as you've pointed out, that retail rate presumably will continue to escalate over time. I'm sure folks would love it if it went down, but generally, yes, I'm sure it will continue to go up over time. So I think 2289 does have an inflation mechanism in that respect. The second point I would say is that Mr. Barami, I think, could probably expand on this if needed. But the payback periods that we've calculated as being relatively comparable between those two rate schedules would have accounted for the fact that the energy price is not proposed to inflate. And so if the energy price were in fact inflating, then there would be an even shorter payback period under 2289 that would be actually more advantageous compared to the status quo.
Thank you. But the instantaneous metering is gonna change that whole calculation between the 1289 and the 2289 customer, correct? There'll be, what I'm trying to say is, there's going to be less self-consumption under 2289 than there is under 1289 because you're proposing that any kilowatt hour that gets onto the grid, I'm sorry, do you know what I'm saying?
I think so. And so what I would say is physically, there would be no change. And so today, BC Hydro's meters have an outflow and an inflow register. They are able to measure instantaneous injection and into the grid. And so in a physical sense, the amount that a customer is self-consuming today and offsetting from a self-consumption perspective is the same whether they're on rate schedule 1289 or rate schedule 2289. What is different is how BC Hydro is compensating for it. And so under 1289, we're taking the kilowatt hours that are injected into the grid and we're allowing the customer to bank them and offset the retail rate at a later time. Under 2289, we're saying, no, we're going to do away with the banking, and instead we're going to apply that energy price of 10 cents. But physically, it's exactly the same.
Thank you. Moving on here. So we've already established there's an approximately 17-year payback period, somewhere around there, just as an illustrative in the application.
Yes, correct.
And so for a 25 or 30-year customer installation, there's some years after that basically the customer's getting free electricity because they've paid off their system. Is that correct?
I don't know that I would characterize it as free electricity. I mean, I think customers that have self-generation, they're making an investment, and they're making that investment based on an anticipation of future benefits. And so if a customer had an expectation that their facility was going to last 25 years, and if they knew that, or they thought that they were going to recoup that investment after 20, then for that remaining 5 years, they've now got that facility and it's paid for itself. I just don't know that I would call it free electricity in the sense that that customer would still be a customer of BC Hydro, and they'd still be needing to pay for the service that they are being provided by BC Hydro.
Are these post-payback customers' benefits, do they appear in the rate design analysis?
No.
Are reduced customer energy costs a material economic impact when evaluating the fairness of a rate?
If you mean reduce cost to the customer that has the self-generation themselves, then I think that is certainly an impact that's considered when we look at this issue. But in terms of whether it makes its way into the energy price for net generation, no. And the reason for that would be that is a benefit to that individual customer who has the generation. It is not a benefit that flows to the other ratepayers that are paying that energy price.
Thank you. So Dunsky gave us a, what do they call it, comprehensive value?
Comprehensive framework, yes.
Comprehensive framework, approximately 15 cents.
I can check, just hold on.
It's a little bit greater than 15 cents, but yeah.
And in IR response to our question on the value of greenhouse gas benefits, there was another 4 cents.
Do you have the IR reference by chance?
Not with me right here, but
none of us have that reference in front of us, but from recollection, I think that's approximately correct, yes.
approximations will work. So roughly maybe 19 cents a kilowatt hour.
If I take that 4 cents as being correct, yes, but again, we don't have it in front of us.
And the proposed net billing price is 10 cents.
That's correct.
So BC Hydro has not adopted Dunsky's higher export valuation.
We have not adopted the comprehensive framework valuation. The comprehensive framework is the same as the expanded framework with regards to utility benefits. It then adds on societal benefits, and BC Hydro does not propose to include the value of societal benefits in the energy price for net generation. That's correct.
Another section here. So BC Hydro's DSM programs, including the Peak Saver program, the load displacement, the solar and battery projects, that's all under the Clean Energy Act.
I don't believe so. The way I would characterize those programs is they are demand-side management programs, and they are subject to the demand-side measures regulation under the Utilities Commission Act.
And these were approved by an order in council, the DSM.
So currently BC Hydro's demand side management expenditures are set out in our fiscal 2026 to fiscal 2027 demand side management expenditure schedule. That particular expenditure schedule was something that the Commission was directed to accept as part of the rates for fiscal 26 and 27 being directed. In the absence of such a direction, the typical course is that BC Hydro would include our demand side management expenditures in a revenue requirements application, and the Commission would review and determine whether or not to accept those expenditures as part of that process.
Honestly, I can't really compute that, but it's on the record, so I'll go back and read how that all works. So you're saying it's still up for the Commission to review those DSM?
No, so maybe to just take a step back. Basically, the way the process works is that when BC Hydro has demand side management programs that we want to put forward, those are detailed in what's called a demand side management expenditure schedule. The Commission, under the Utilities Commission Act, has to review and determine whether or not to accept those expenditures. And in the case of the expenditures for the current period that we're in, the Commission was directed to accept those expenditures. So those expenditures have been accepted by virtue of that direction.
So in this direction, were those expenditures deemed prudent?
So the direction I'm referencing here is a direction that the Government of BC made pursuant to Section 3 of the Utilities Commission Act. When making such a direction, I wouldn't say it gets into those types of characterizations. It simply is government exercising a power that it has under that section to direct the Commission in certain regards.
So is it fair to say there's two-lane regulatory structure when it comes to customer DG? One is DSM and one is rates?
I don't think so. So maybe I think that the direction aspect of this is probably a bit of a red herring in terms of the point you're getting at. So maybe I'll step back from that a bit and just say that when we advance demand side measures, whether it be the examples you referenced or indeed actually the solar rebate is a demand side measure, we have to look at the demand side measures regulation and make sure that the programs we're proposing are consistent with the requirements of that regulation. That includes a cost effectiveness test. When we're advancing a rate, such as what we're doing here, sections 59 through 61 of the Utilities Commission Act set out the Commission's rate setting context, and so that would be what we're considering when it comes to rates.
Are you aware of any legislation that would prevent the rebates from falling under a rate proposal? And then we have this mechanism that's been worked out with the DSM. But is there anything actually preventing those from being heard in a rate hearing and part of the rate?
I think what I would say is that the rebates have been put forward as a demand side measure. In terms of whether a demand side measure can be a rate and those sorts of things, I think that would probably be best addressed as a legal argument, and so I would leave it to that. But the rebates are a demand side measure.
But is a choice? It could be in rates. Is that what you're saying? Or
I'm not sure it is a choice. Again, and I think what we're looking at here is different constructs in terms of how things are considered, and so whether the rebates are something that could be constructed as a rate It's not something I myself have considered. Whether that's something that's legally possible, I think would be a matter BC Hydro would need to opine on in legal argument.
Thank you. Earlier today, I can't remember who this came up with, but what I heard was that the customer economics are not exactly relevant to the rate design. It's a customer choice.
That's right. So what we were saying was that when we're looking at, for example, the energy price, we're looking at the utility benefit value, not necessarily the cost of service for the customer.
But you're also using customer payback as an illustration to justify or in relation to the rebate and to 2289's comparability to 1289.
Yes, and I think 2 points. One, as we discussed previously, I think I characterize that more as a coincidence than a driver. And a second, as Ms. Cho just mentioned to me, I don't think that's different than, for example, when we look at other rate designs, it'll be common for us to look at customer bill impacts. And so we'll often say, look, here's a rate design proposal. We could go further, we could increase a demand charge further, for example, but here's the bill impacts, and we might moderate that proposal based on those customer bill impacts. So I think what we've done here is consistent with that kind of an approach, for example.
BC Hydro owns some solar and battery equipment in their EV charging off-grid station up on the north.
I don't know, actually. That's not something I'm involved in, so I couldn't speak to whether we do or don't.
The reason I bring it up is just want to understand if the value of that particular project, which I think some of the commissioners here were on the panel that looked at the application for that. It's an off-grid EV charging station, and I can furnish information on that if you'd like.
I'm familiar now with the reference you're making. What I would say on that is that those off-grid stations were what are called prescribed undertakings, which are costs that BC Hydro must be allowed to recover in accordance with the provisions that are set out in the Clean Energy Act. And so we made an application to the Commission to recover those expenditures, and in accordance with that framework, the Commission granted that cost recovery.
So when that project was designed, there was obviously some kind of business case for it.
I couldn't speak to that. I wasn't involved in the project myself.
It must have a certain value to the utility. And my question is that valued in the same way that customer solar is valued?
Go ahead. Yeah, we just have a BC Hydro Council.
Just raising because I think the witnesses have answered that they don't have information with respect to this line of questioning. So I don't see that we're going to get very far if we continue with it, given that the witnesses aren't aware of and weren't involved in that application or those projects.
And I might add to that at least a line of question about business case, because of other things we've been involved in, I am familiar with the prescribed undertaking. And so, I mean, the economics could be really bad in a prescribed undertaking. But I just want to know where you're going with this question, because yeah, they're not familiar with it, and I want to know what the value is of the questions you're asking right along that line.
There's very commonly understood values of solar, and the NSPM, the National Standard Practice Manual, describes how to value that. the comprehensive framework that Dunsky performed was to use the NSPM as its guide. So it seems to me that particularly an off-grid station has particular benefits, locational benefits, non-wires. In this case, it's a GHG benefit because of the EV charging. So just wondering whether everything's being looked at on the same level playing field, whether certain values are appreciated.
So I think either this panel can answer or you can take it on advisement.
I think what I can say is, again, I wasn't involved in the business case for that station, so I couldn't speak to the question. But what I think I can say, based on my general knowledge of BC Hydro's involvement in electric vehicle charging stations, is that I think the primary driver of those stations really was the government has an objective that's often referred to as the electric highway, where they want to have stations at certain intervals so that it's possible for someone to basically drive anywhere in the province and be able to charge. And those off-grid stations were deployed in certain remote areas to help achieve that objective.
And I don't want to cut you off, so I'm not trying to do that, but I am really trying to sort out what are the things you can say in final argument versus cross-examination of people that you've had already an opportunity to send information requests to. So if you didn't understand a response or you want to probe it further, I'm really looking for that kind of thing. Thanks.
Thank you.
And to not be going on to stuff that you might want to make in argument, because we'll have a chance to
Sure.
see that.
Yeah, thank you. Got a question about smart inverters, this volt-var contradiction. I guess that's for another BC Hydro panel.
Yes, that would be for the other BC Hydro panel.
So I'm moving on to 2290, and I want to thank EcoSmart for focusing in on that. That community net metering is one of the core reasons for the Community Solar Coalition to exist, that and responding to climate change. But this will be fairly brief, if I can get it on my... So BC Hydro introduced a 25 megawatt hour host load requirement during this hearing to make use of the load displacement program. Is that correct?
So this was a matter that we brought up in our rebuttal evidence. I wouldn't say that we introduced that requirement. Rather, I think what happened was that some interveners in their evidence, I think most notably EcoSmart, were raising whether or not there would be economical projects underneath the community solar rate as BC had proposed it. And so one of the things that prompted us to do was to look at our existing demand side management programs and think about, are there existing programs that perhaps could be made available to community generators to help them with their economics if that was something they wanted to take advantage of. And indeed, there was an existing load displacement program that our energy management group had on offer. We discussed with them if it could be made available to community generation. They determined it could be, and so we simply revised the rules such that that could be the case. But the requirement you're referencing was always a part of that program and just something that we maintained.
And that wasn't part of the working group discussions?
Not that I can recall, no.
So I have another section here about working group process issues, is that for another team?
No, that would be for us.
So BC Hydro did not provide a clear definition of community net metering during the working group, correct?
I think we've addressed this issue of definitions in one of our information request responses. I can pull up the reference in a moment, but maybe as I'm doing that, I'll just say that I think we did have many discussions in the net metering working group around definitions and what certain things mean, and what certain terms may mean. My experience, and I think the experience of my colleagues, was that there tended to be a fair bit of wouldn't necessarily say disagreement, but certainly a fair bit of diversity around those definitions. And so, as I was saying earlier, I think for a number of terms, our experience was, depending on who you would ask, you'd probably get a slightly different definition.
And you are aware that we asked to come up with a set of definitions so we kind of were all on the same page of what we were talking about.
Yes, and again, I'll try and pull up the reference here in a moment. I think this is something we addressed in our information request responses on rebuttal evidence. That was a request that was made. I think we referenced a few different meetings where conversations around definitions had taken place, and again, kind of the experience that we had where there would be a diversity of viewpoints around definitions. Eventually, what occurred is that BC Hydro put definitions into a rate schedule, and that rate schedule is what's been proposed in this proceeding. And I think, as we explained in that response, that is our typical process when it comes to rate design. Typically we haven't put out the rate schedule for engagement itself. Typically, what we do is we have an engagement process. We try to ascertain the views and our position on those views, and then we compose a rate schedule that tries to capture our proposals. But we don't typically have an engagement process around the rate schedule wording itself. And Ms. Cho has just brought up the reference for me. That response I've been referring to is our response to CSCIR 2.6.1 in Exhibit B28.
Thank you for referencing that. So our consultant expert, Carl Rabago, suggests in his evidence that the process has some administrative inefficiencies. Would you say that leaving the definitions of key terms to a rate hearing could be described as inefficient, given that we asked in the working group to establish those?
I guess that would probably depend on who you ask. I think BC Hydro's view would be, in fact, that actually it may have been more inefficient to persist with trying to get an exact definition based on our experience, given that when we put forward certain terms, we were finding that different parties had different definitions. I think our evaluation at the time was that if we persisted in trying to find a definition that everyone said, yes, absolutely, that is the definition, that we probably would have spent a lot more time on definitions and less time on the other issues we were exploring, such as what is the value of solar and how do we go about determining that.
And you're aware that the Community Solar Coalition made an application for a procedural conference within a rate hearing, which you say is the more appropriate place to talk about definitions. And we provided a list of our definitions. Did BC Hydro support that?
I don't recall. I remember the submission by Community Solar Coalition for a procedural conference. I don't recall the process that came after that in terms of whether BC Hydro made a submission or not.
But the procedural conference could have been a place where we talked about definitions versus a hearing like this.
I guess what I would say is, I mean, I know that there was a proposal made by the Community Solar Coalition for a procedural conference. I know that the commission determined the process that it was going to follow, which did not include that procedural conference. So I'm not sure there's much left to argue there in terms of the merits. The process proceeded as it did.
Thank you. So the term sheet for this rate, I think there was 2 different versions during the course of this proceeding. There's a section in it on liability. There's a clause in it that concerns us, and I don't have it in front of me, and I should. That essentially says that BC Hydro would not be liable for malicious actions. It's in both term sheets.
I haven't been able to find it myself yet flipping through, but I think what I would say is that probably is an issue best addressed by the panel addressing implementation. So probably best to wait till that panel.
Very good.
And of course, Hydro will make sure that where we've had questions today that were directed to that panel will be ready for those. Great, so we can move quickly. Thank you.
BC Hydro did not file a cost of service study for RS 1289 customers. Is that correct?
So we didn't do a full cost of service study. However, we did file some IRs. Let me just find that reference. So if you look at BC Hydro's response to BCUC IR 1.8.1 of exhibit, exhibit B13, we do provide some RC ratios and cost shifting numbers. So for example, for residential, depending on whether you value the energy sent to BC Hydro at either LRMC or mid-C, it's either $339 of cost shifting per residential customer, and that's about 79% RC ratio. And sorry, that was for if you assume LRMC value. But if it's at mid-C, it'd be $441 per residential net metering customer, and that was an RC ratio of 74%.
So is that based on a cost of service study?
Yeah, so we did apply the cost of service methodology. It just wasn't part of the FACOS that we do.
Thank you, panel. No further questions.
Thank you. We've gone for an hour and a quarter. Let's continue on a bit longer. We're okay. Maybe 15 more minutes. So yes, please. The next question.
So I believe the next party in the order of cross-examination is appearing virtually today, and that is Charge Solar.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Yes, thanks to the panel and for the interveners who have spoken so far. Very informative. And we plan to be there a little later in the week. So thanks for accommodating the remote connection here today. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Probably not.
I can.
All right, so we have a bit of a technical difficulty. I'm going to take the break now. So it's a 15-minute break. Oh, sorry, there's an issue prior to break.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have one little correction to add.
Okay, why don't you do that now?
It was left out of this, my testimony, and I'll take 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Michelle.
Oh. What, a correction to add? You
well,
mean?
No, they asked for a reference and I didn't have it.
Oh, I see.
Postponed a question.
But why will that take 3 to 5 minutes?
Well,
Wouldn't you
1
just, yeah, just go ahead and give it to us right now. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, one comment. I'm not sure if the transcription service is hooked up, given that there's no stream. So perhaps we could address this after the break.
Let's take a 15-minute break. So we'll come back at 10 to 4. Or 10, yeah, no, 10 to 3. Getting ahead of myself. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody online that could just confirm you're able to hear me? Just take yourself off mute and let me know if you can hear
Confirmed.
this. Thank
Yes.
you. Just in case you weren't able to hear, we're on a break now until 10 to the hour. So I think that's 2:50. So we'll be back at that time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I see our panel is set and ready to go. And so we'll see if we can get the remote questions from Jeff McCauley. And Jeff, I see you've gone live, so you can unmute yourself and please go ahead and get started.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, just one second.
We cannot hear the speaker in the room, if that's the intention.
Can you hear me now? Oh, there we go.
We can.
Sorry about that.
Thanks for telling us that.
So I was just saying that just want to clarify, before the break, we were talking about the technical feasibility of the EcoSmart proposal and BC Hydro indicating that it would be technically feasible, and just want to be clear about exactly what we were referring to there. What we were referring to is this timestamps approach where you can sync up the subscribers' consumption with the community generators' generation. That's what we were saying is technically feasible, but want to be clear that it would not be feasible to do that on an instantaneous basis, only on an hourly basis. And we explain why that's the case in answer 32 of our rebuttal evidence.
Great, thank you very much. So one more time, we'll try, Mr. McCauley, and try again. Go for it.
Okay, my name is Jeff McCauley. I'm here on behalf of Charge Solar. And as a reminder, Charge Solar et al. Is a cohort established by the BCUC, and it includes Charge Solar. We're a national solar and battery distributor based in Victoria, BC, along with two British Columbia-based battery and solar installation companies, Riverside Energy Systems and Shift Energy Group, who are joining me on the call virtually. These companies represent those companies that are out there working with homeowners, businesses, First Nations communities on the consideration of self-generation, typically behind the meter solar, sometimes including battery storage. As reflected in our submitted evidence, we believe that there is room for improvement on rate structure 2290 as proposed, but we're really focused on rate structure 2289, and specifically as it relates to residential customers. And really, just to cut right to the chase on our position generally, and we'll get into our clarifying questions. We believe that the complexity of transitioning to net billing for residential customers under proposed rate structure 2289, the complexity will outweigh the reduction in cost shifting. And so we think the adoption rate is really going to be tamped down in a net billing environment relative to net metering, despite some of the early signals that you're seeing.
Mr. McCauley, it's Chairperson Jackard. We just want to remind you that this is a cross-examination process, and so maybe this is your quick I'm going to hope this is your quick preamble, and then the purpose here is not to do final argument or whatever, but is to just ask some questions where you don't feel you got satisfactory answers from the panel, the applicant. Okay, so please go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'll jump right in. Yeah. I just wanted to provide that context of who we were, because we're an ad hoc group. And so, jumping right in, I'm going to ask a couple of the questions and I'll pass it to my colleagues that are within the cohort on their clarifying questions. So the first question is around the original evidentiary filing. And we've asked a couple of different questions through the IR process, but just wanted to clarify some cost shifting data. So if you don't mind, if we can go to Exhibit B8, which was the original evidentiary filing by BC Hydro, and in that filing in Appendix B3, we're on page D1, and this is where the residential rate structure as currently exists under 1289 and as proposed under 2289 is contrasted from the perspective of cost shifting. So I'll give everyone a moment to get there and just maybe give me a thumbs up or a verbal confirmation. So again, Exhibit B8, Appendix B3, page D1.
We're there.
Okay, great. So really, this is a table for those that can't see it or haven't referenced it yet. It's a table showing annual cost shifting, and it's a really nice summary table because it shows non-participant and participant cost shifting annually, and then total cost shift on the far right column. And I just want to clarify a few things. So I'm choosing 2040 as just a date that's out there in the future, just to compare the two scenarios. So under the business as usual scenario, which is on D1, in year 2040, I believe the appropriate way to interpret this is to look at $80 impact under the residential cost shifting per non-participant in year 2040, and that the total cost shifting for that particular year is $172 million. Is that correct?
That would appear logical to me. However, it is Dunsky's evidence and table, so I think it might be more appropriate to have Dunsky speak to these questions.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may just cut in, I noticed one of the participants has their hands raised online. I'm not sure if somebody had an issue they wanted to raise.
Bill Andrews here. I just want to suggest that if the questioner could give the PDF page number, we'd be able to find the reference much more quickly. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for stating that, Mr. Andrews. And then preceding that, we've got the response from the panel saying that this is better with Dunsky, this particular one. So they're passing it to that.
I think if I could just briefly challenge that, we're not asking how Dunsky came up with the data, but rather how BC Hydro is interpreting it. And I believe as the proponent, I presume BC Hydro is familiar with these numbers. Really, cost shifting is a core theme. I'm talking about the interpretation of the numbers rather than the preparation or analysis.
That is how I read the table, yes.
Okay, and so then in 2040 of the proposed structure now, we're on page, let's see, we're on page D6, and under the same year, that cost shift is reduced to $37 per non-participant, and then 81 million total. And really the question is, we just wanted to make sure in this table that if the end result were to keep residential customers on rate structure 1289, that this reduction in total cost shift is all that would be avoided, and that all of the other cost shifting would still be as shown in the other tables for small, medium, and large general service customers, and that simply this reduction in cost shifting by transitioning to net billing simply wouldn't be achieved. Is that BC Hydro's interpretation as well?
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay, we're asking simply because we wanted to make sure there wasn't any interconnection between the two tables, and so that's very helpful. Thank you for confirming that. This next one may be more of a Dunsky question, so feel free to defer to them. We wanted to ensure that the growth rate under those two circumstances, the total installed capacity between now and 2040 was presumed to be the same under the business as usual case under net energy metering versus the as proposed net energy billing for residential specifically.
For Dunsky's value of solar and cost shifting report, yes, they use the same growth scenario for both. Okay, great. Really, that leads me to my second question and my final question before I pass to my colleagues. So while we're not here today to discuss the level of the rebates, something that has continuously come up between information requests and responses between us and BC Hydro has been the inclusion of those rebates in the payback durations in the evidentiary filing. And we remain concerned and confused why rebates would be included in the payback durations inside of the evidentiary filing when BC Hydro is acknowledging that those are incentives that can come and go and that the rebate is not there to stay. It's not inherent in the rate application. We're curious why BC Hydro will not either directly or ask Dunsky to conduct an analysis that would remove the rebates
and show what the payback durations would be in the absence of them. And it's really just to reference not the suitability of the level of the incentive, but rather the expected adoption rates should the payback duration get quite a bit worse if and when the rebates were no longer there. And so we're just wondering if BC Hydro could clarify why they do not want to show scenarios without the rebate included.
So Dunsky did conduct scenarios with the rebate taken out. That is the alternative rate scenario in the in their solar adoption report. The alternative rate scenario is a scenario where there is no rebate, but the proposals in this proceeding are adopted.
Okay, including residential growth rate assumptions under that scenario?
So this here is the commissioners. They're like the judges. They're sitting at commissioner. At the commissioner of.
Yes. No. So just to announce to somebody that you're not muted. So please, everyone, check your mute. All right. Please go ahead, Mr. McCauley. Or no, you were about to respond to him.
Yes, the statement that Mr. McCauley just made is correct.
Okay. It is correct, as in you haven't yet shown. Oh, sorry, the growth rate assumptions. You're saying that the growth rate was shown in the no rebate scenario by Dunsky?
Yes, it's called the alternative rate scenario.
Okay, in the original filing, because this is what we had asked about in our IR1, and I'm surprised to hear that that's already conducted.
Yes, in the original filing. So if you refer to Exhibit B8, which was the evidentiary update filing, and I believe it's Appendix B1 to Exhibit B8 is the solar adoption study. There is a scenario in that study that is the alternative rate scenario. That is a adoption scenario with the proposals in this proceeding accepted and no rebate.
Okay. And then, and that is growth rate only, but then there are not associated tables to show the cost shifting under those scenarios. Just so I'm understanding that what is and isn't available in B8.
From our recollection, that is not a scenario that was an input into Dunsky's cost shifting analysis. What I would say is I think Dunsky would be able to speak obviously to the various scenarios that they ran and why, and what they included in their cost shifting analysis and why. And I think that has been canvassed in their rebuttal evidence as well. And they did add some additional scenarios in their rebuttal evidence.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll flag that one for follow up with Dunsky and pass to my colleague, Ben from Riverside.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I want to say I was pleased to hear this morning from Mr. Sanvi's comments that both the province and BC Hydro are wanting to see the self-generation program to continue and to have it contribute meaningfully to the province's resource generation mix in the future. I hope I understood that correctly. Did I understand correctly on that, Chris?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I was wondering if you could please describe what BC Hydro has considered as possible options that would be fair for the regular review and adjustment to the value of solar with regards to its purchase from self-generation customers if net billing is approved. I know at the moment there's been a 5-year fixed rate proposed. Have you considered alternates for regular review and what that might look like?
We did. I'll just bring up a reference here. Bear with me a moment. Yes, so I would refer to our response to BCUCIR 1.3.4.1 in Exhibit B13. And in that response, we do talk about alternative periods that we considered. We say, for example, an annual period, a 3-year period, a 7-year period, 10-year period. And ultimately, why we landed on 5 years, I think, is twofold. First of all, as we've discussed previously, there is a point at which around calendar 2032, which is just past the 5-year mark, where Dunsky's frameworks, at least at this point, do begin to diverge. So that seemed to be a natural point to us where the Commission may want to revisit this issue. The second, I guess, is more anecdotal. When we were thinking of a period to update, we wanted to weigh, on the one hand, obviously the more you update, the more you can closely follow the value as it may be changing. On the other hand, that could be of concern to customers if that value is constantly subject to adjustment. So 5 years felt to us like an appropriate balance between those things. Nothing particularly scientific about that. That just seemed to be a good middle ground in our view.
Okay, thank you. We've understood from responses to our IRs and to some of the other interveners that BC Hydro feels that the cost of energy purchase in other markets should not play into the valuation of surplus generation from self-generation customers. Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. I would just like to raise the point that in fiscal 2024, I believe BC Hydro purchased 25% of its domestically distributed energy from other utilities. It was in the order of 1,603 kilowatt hours, or sorry, gigawatt hours, at a cost of approximately 1.38 billion. And that comes out to 10.15 cents per kilowatt hour, which after the addition of the distribution losses, or the loss figure that Dunsky included in their avoided cost analysis of 8.7%, puts the value of that energy at 11.03 cents per kilowatt hour. And you don't feel that's relevant in the discussion on the value of customer surplus solar energy?
So what I would say is, I think in terms of whether it's relevant, I think it's certainly a valid point to raise, and Charge Solar has indeed raised that point. We get into this issue in our response to BCUCIR 1.2.2 of Exhibit B13, and the issue that we get into there is whether the value of the energy should be based on the long-run marginal cost or on, as Charge Solar has suggested, the wholesale market value. And BC Hydro's view is that it's appropriate for it to be based on the long-run marginal cost. And the reason for that is that we are building our forecast of customer solar generation into the load resource balances in our integrated resource plan. And so by doing that, the cost that we are avoiding is that long-run marginal cost. If that generation was not built in there, then we likely would be purchasing additional utility scale energy through, for example, a call for power process. So in our view, that is the appropriate basis of comparison in terms of the value. The reason that the wholesale market, in our view, is not a relevant comparator is that that really comes into play from a short-term operational perspective of the system, and so that's not where we've built in the generation from customer solar. We've built it into our long-term planning, and so that, in our view, is the appropriate basis for the value.
Yeah, thank you. So it's my understanding, and I think probably historical evidence would confirm this, that if we are counting on IPP generation or BC Hydro constructed generation, that it's, you know, through power calls or through a construction process, that future energy resource is likely to be at least 6 to 8 years away from being available. Is that correct?
I think that's generally correct. Yes, I would say there may be possibility of a slightly shorter lead time, but generally, yes, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I guess I'm struggling with how it could be that a kilowatt hour in the hand right now in real time, even today, from existing self-generation customers, is not worth any more than kilowatt hours in the bush that might not be available for 6 to 8 years. I'm struggling with that. Can you help me understand that?
Yes. So the way I would think about it is BC Hydro goes through long-term planning cycles where we're updating our integrated resource plan on a regular basis. And so every time we're updating our integrated resource plan, we build in that forecast of supply from customer generation, and that influences the volume that we purchase from other sources. And so that's been the case since our 2021 integrated resource plan. So in our 2021 integrated resource plan, our forecast of customer generation at the time would have been built into those load resource balances, would have influenced the volume of energy acquisition from other sources in that plan. And so that happened there in 2021. Now fast forward to 2025. Again, it's built in 2025 and it's influencing those future decisions. So it comes into play as you go through those cycles, and as you move forward in the cycles, you displace future purchases.
Is it fair to say if there had been more solar generation, customer-owned solar generation in place in fiscal 2024, that you would have saved, what did I come out with, 11.03 cents a kilowatt hour in reduced purchases from other utilities?
I'm not sure I could say that. You're probably getting into an area that's not within my expertise in terms of how the system is operated and how those decisions were made. And so I don't know if I could quite make that statement. Maybe what I would add, though, that I think is important context here is certainly 2024 was a year where the market purchases that BC Hydro was making were quite high. We were in a drought period. There was a very high need for energy, and therefore the value was quite high. That has not been the case in other years. And so if we were to take the position that the energy price should be the mid-C price, as I think is being suggested, we actually know how that goes because we can see the surplus energy payout price under the current rate schedule 1289. And that price, I believe, subject to check, has been as low as 4 cents per kilowatt hour in some years, as well as high as 10 or 11 cents is being referenced. But it does fluctuate quite dramatically depending on the year.
Thank you. I think it's been made clear in the evidentiary record that societal benefits, as were estimated in Dunsky's comprehensive framework, have not been incorporated into the evaluation of solar for proposed net billing. That's correct. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And just while I'm at it, if I may, Ms. Cho sent me a helpful reference. It's BCUCIR 1.5.3 of Exhibit B13. That will show you the mid-C prices throughout the years, as I referenced. And in fact, the lowest price was as low as 2.85 cents in the year 2020.
Yes, thank you. The mid-C price, I think, varies moment by moment, if I'm not mistaken. So I expect, and this might be a question for others, but I expect that given that the average purchase price of that imported energy was 10.15 cents plus losses, that there must have been periods during the importation months where this was going on, where BC Hydro paid less, and certainly others where they paid considerably more. The point is that average over the number of months was 10.15 plus losses. Thank you. So I was going to ask about cost shifting and societal benefits, and thanks for clarifying, Mr. Sanvi, that in fact societal benefits have not been included in your proposed solar valuation. I understood from your written preliminary remarks that as of November 2025, that self-generation customers have installed, is it 132 megawatts of capacity? Is that correct?
That's correct. And forgive me, but I'll just going back to the previous issue, the values I was referencing were average annual values. But yes, to your question, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I also, from my experience in solar design, I'm aware that the average solar PV effectiveness in BC is in the order of 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of installed solar. And so that would mean that 132 megawatts of existing customer-owned generation would be generating considerable energy. And in fact, if you take the 132 megawatt peak and multiply by that solar effectiveness and value it at an additional 5.2 cents to incorporate societal benefits, as Dunsky did in their comprehensive framework, I believe it was 5.22 cents that was the basic difference between the avoided cost and the comprehensive framework. So approximately 5.2 cents of societal benefits. If we incorporate that, what it suggests is that existing self-generation customers are presently bringing about a little under $6.9 million per year of societal benefit to the utility and to the province. And so today, at least today, we've been talking about the fairness of rates in terms of cost shifting. I'd like to ask a question about fairness in terms of shifted benefit. How does BC Hydro feel this is fair to self-generation customers who you've already said are not the same as IPPs? How is it fair that these customers are currently bringing $6.9 million of societal benefit that's unacknowledged or not valued in the new rate? And how will that be fair to subsequent self-generation customers who will be investing, or you hope to be investing in the future?
Yeah, so this is a matter we spoke to in our evidentiary update. And I think we've gotten into a little bit previously here today in that I think Dunsky, through their value of solar study, did provide a lens on what the societal benefits of distributed solar may be. We've heard arguments today from other interveners with regards to the cost shifting that still exists despite BC Hydro's proposals in this proceeding. And so BC Hydro's view would be a few things. I think, first of all, that that cost shifting that persists is a recognition in part of the societal value that net metering brings. in terms of some of those societal benefits. Two, that in our view, it's not appropriate for the energy price that customers are paying for net generation injected into the grid to be inflated for those societal benefits, given they're being recognized in other ways. And I think three, what I would say is that this is consistent, I think, in terms of how BC Hydro thinks of other resources. So I'll use the example of land and water impacts. Land and water impacts is a societal benefit that BC Hydro quantified. You'll see in our 2025 integrated resource plan that land and water impacts is a planning objective of that plan. And you'll see that in that plan, BC Hydro makes various resource selections, in part considering that land and water impacts planning objective. Now, we don't, when doing that, say, well, here's a resource we've selected because it has better land and water impacts, therefore we're going to inflate the value that we give this resource. Rather, what we say in that plan is when we are considering what resource to select, we are going to consider the fact that this resource has better land and water impacts, and that may encourage us to select that resource over a different resource. That's really how we see societal benefits come into play. And in fact, you'll see in the 2025 IRP, the solar rebate resource option that BC Hydro has selected, one of the reasons that we cite for selecting that resource, as opposed to example, having a larger power call, is that we think that resource option has better land and water impacts. And so we're recognizing the benefit in that way.
Okay, thank you. I think this might be my final question before I turn it over to one of my colleagues. I know that BC Hydro, in answering intervener questions and even in rebuttal evidence, has suggested that they're continuing to see applications coming in for self-generation, which is a really good sign. I'm happy to hear that. What I'm wondering about is what measures BC Hydro has taken to consult with industry providers such as Charge Solar et al. Or members of the net metering working group around the volume of customers who have been considering self-generation, approaching us to help them review it and deciding against it. I understand that you're seeing those that continue to move forward. I wonder if you're getting an accurate picture of just how many more people are saying no today than they were 6 months ago or 8 months ago. So what measures have you taken to get that other piece of the statistic that I think would more accurately help you gauge what's really going on in the market?
Yeah, so what I would say is, I mean, certainly I think BC Hydro is always open to feedback and engagement, and so would encourage those in the industry, if they have information they wish to share with BC Hydro, to reach out and do that. We do have an information request response to Charge Solar IR 2.1.3.b of Exhibit B29. And in that response, we do detail the engagement that we have done since the solar rebate was put into market with industry providers to understand uptake and how that's going. I don't have the IR in front of me, but I believe it references activities such as ongoing forums, dedicated email communication, et cetera, to make sure that we have an avenue for that feedback to occur.
So is it safe to say that at this moment, BC Hydro is not exactly sure what percentage of self-generation inquiries that providers like ourselves are fielding out in the market actually are making it through to fruition? Or do you have that metric? Or
I don't myself. I think our implementation panel may be able to speak to whether our program administrators have some of that insight. Certainly, I would note that I think Charge Solar has shared evidence to this effect on the record in this proceeding. I think what BC Hydro's response to that would be is that we have continued to see very steady uptake of the rate on an ongoing basis, and I think there have been at different junctures exploration of whether BC Hydro's consideration of different changes has had a dampening effect on the market. And I think our evidence has been that from what we can see in terms of ongoing signups, we are not seeing that effect. We are seeing participation continue to grow and be strong.
So you haven't seen or heard about the accelerated reduction in interest in the marketplace?
I think Charge Solar certainly has filed evidence to that respect, so I certainly am aware of that evidence and reviewed it as part of this proceeding. In terms of additional feedback that may have been given in that regard, as I mentioned, I know that there is ongoing engagement with BC Hydro with regards to the solar rebates with the solar industry. I myself am not part of those sessions, so I can't speak to what may have been shared in those sessions, but I know that there's an avenue for that feedback, and that there are colleagues of mine that are involved in engaging with the industry through those forums.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the last of my questions for the moment. I'd like to defer to one of my colleagues. I'm not sure who wants to go next, but I'll let them unmute and speak up. Thank you very much.
Can you tell us how many of your colleagues are going to be asking questions?
Well, there's two other colleagues on the line, and I'm not sure how many of them will ask questions, but I'll leave it up to them to answer your question. Thank you.
You haven't had an opportunity to coordinate your questions. Then I would just ask that the other two questioners really be careful not to cover the same area that was just covered by you. Thanks.
Understood, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the advice. This is Steve. I'm just going to follow up what Ben was saying with a couple of industry perspective or to inform industry's perspective questions. Mr. Sandby, would you agree that net metering has been very successful in growing solar in BC?
At growing solar in BC, yes, I believe we've seen steady growth under the net metering rate.
Okay. And that was even before the introduction of the rebates.
Yes, I mean, I think, as with anything, it depends on your definition of success, but I think we have seen growth under the net metering rate even before the rebate, yes. Okay.
So would you say it's fair to say that there's been a big growth in the solar industry since 2004?
I wouldn't have knowledge myself of how the industry has grown. I can certainly grant the logical linkage between the industry and the growth in the program, but I probably couldn't speak to it more than that.
Okay, thank you. Would you happen to know what you would attribute that growth of the solar industry to, or of the solar net metering applications? What do you think they're growing?
So during the process of customer engagement to prepare for this application, BC Hydro conducted 2 surveys with our customers. And from both surveys, customers reported that to reduce their electricity bills is their #1 consideration or driver to participate in BC Hydro's net metering service.
Okay, so a favorable rate that facilitates the reduction of your BC Hydro bill is one of the primary drivers. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with part of that. As Mr. Sanvi explained earlier this morning, part of customers' bill reduction is in their self-consumption offset, not necessarily entirely to the BC Hydro's payout of the excess generation.
Okay. Would it then surprise you to hear that in late 2025, we are now seeing actually a decline in the solar industry in BC? and solar installers are laying staff off, and we're actually seeing some long-running installers going out of business. Do you have any thoughts about why this might be happening?
I don't know that we would. I certainly would, I think, defer to Charge Solar in terms of if those impacts are occurring, what they would be, and their evidence around why those impacts might be occurring.
Thank you. We've established, even in the Dunsky report, it states that net metering is actually the best financial mechanism or best payback incentive for ratepayers or for customers to install solar. This is followed closely by net billing with a rebate. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure I would. I certainly acknowledge payback periods can vary for individual customers, and I think we've explored and evidenced the range of payback periods that may apply based on different assumptions. But based on the analysis that BC Hydro did, the average payback period under the status quo was 19.2 years. Under the proposals in this proceeding with the rebate, it was 18.8 years, so marginally better.
Okay, thank you. Have you ever tried to explain net billing to a customer or an end user or a ratepayer, whatever you want to call them?
Yes, I think we've had many opportunities in this proceeding to explain net billing. I think we've probably gotten into it a bit today in terms of just describing that net metering, you're banking what you send into the grid and using it to offset future consumption. Net billing, we're assigning that generation a price right when it's injected. And so I think we've had those conversations in this proceeding. Certainly, I have.
Would you say it's easier to explain net metering over net billing?
Yes, I think that could be true. I think net metering, I'll agree, is perhaps a bit more of an intuitive concept, perhaps, to customers. I would note that I think, in general, when we do customer engagement, I think what we find is that there's a range of understanding and sophistication when it comes to understanding of different terms, as you might expect. As an example, when we did the customer survey research for this application, we did ask customers first, would you agree that the compensation for energy sent to BC Hydro should be the same regardless of who you are, what customer class you are? And most customers in the survey agreed with that. But then they also went on to say that they felt net metering was most appropriate. And of course, the first statement is describing net billing. And so I think, in BC Hydro's view, that just illustrates that in general, I think there always is a bit of a difference in terms of the understanding that all of us in this room likely have of these issues and the understanding that an individual customer may have. And we continue to work to make sure that we're providing the supports to help with that.
Thank you. In BC Hydro's 2025 IRP, you indicated that you're actually looking for the solar industry in BC to help meet some of the new demand and supply solar to the grid. Does that mean that the health and the capacity of BC solar installers are important to BC Hydro and its future capacity planning?
Yes, I think that's probably a fair statement. Again, I think this gets into the issues we've canvassed previously in terms of cost of service to the customer, or by extension, then the cost that flows into industry and the utility benefit value. And so I think we've been clear we're considering the utility benefit value, but obviously we are putting these rates forward because we want customers to take them up. And so yes, we would hope and expect that that would continue to be the case.
Okay, I appreciate that, being the solar part of the solar industry. Given the significant impact of the move to net billing, how has BC Hydro evaluated the impact? I know there was the net metering working group and there were a couple of surveys, but would you say that you're constantly engaging with industry?
I do know that there is ongoing engagement between BC Hydro and industry. As I referenced previously, I know that my colleagues in the energy management key business unit do have ways in which they're continuing to engage around the rebates and the uptake of those. Mr. Sanders, who's on the implementation panel for BC Hydro, his team is responsible for the administration of rate schedule 1289 and will be responsible for the administration of the rate schedules proposed in this proceeding should they be approved. So he may be able to speak further to his team's engagements as well.
Okay. And I know you were part of the net metering working group or ancillary. In fact, a lot of people in the room were. Do you remember what industry actually advised you with regards to net billing?
Yes. So I think this is an issue that we canvassed in Chapter 3 of our 2024 rate design application. And in that chapter, we did make it clear the advice we had received from the net metering working group, which was that in general, I would say the net metering working group was opposed to net billing and would have preferred BC Hydro continue with net metering.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that. In our evidence, in C12-12, Section 3, page 15, we showed that through an industry survey that about 25% of solar installers were very concerned with the negative impact of net billing to their businesses. Is this rate application, or is any part of this rate application actually taking into consideration a negative impact on the solar industry?
I think that feedback is absolutely something we were aware of. As I mentioned, certainly through engagement with the net metering working group, we were aware of the concerns that members of the solar industry had with regards to the change from net metering to net billing. I think, as we've discussed previously, BC Hydro's decision to go ahead with net billing, despite that concern from those members, was considering the views of a range of stakeholders, and certainly the panel has heard from stakeholders today that I think have expressed views in support of net billing, or perhaps wanting to get BC Hydro to go even further than we did. So that was us weighing those considerations. I would also say that I think, and this is something that we talk about in Chapter 3 of our 2024 rate design application, there was, I think, concern amongst the net metering working group about rebates and whether rebates were the right way to go. And I would say that was not a sentiment that was shared by customers from what BC Hydro could obtain anyways. We did ask in our customer surveys whether customers were interested in rebates and would want rebates. And in fact, we did also ask them if they would prefer getting a rebate and then a lower price for their generation as opposed to the status quo. And in fact, 35% of customers said, yes, we'd prefer a rebate with a lower price, as opposed to 32% who said the status quo.
Right. And I mean, the rebate was something actually difficult to explain. Well, it was difficult to explain to people the long-term payback of the rebate versus net billing. Do you think that BC Hydro does a successful job of actually explaining to people the cost of net billing with rebate versus net billing or net metering?
I think so. I mean, and as I've discussed previously, I think obviously customers have different levels of understanding with regards to these issues, and so every customer is different. With regards to this proceeding specifically, though, I would direct the panel to Exhibit B8, which is our evidentiary update. And in that evidentiary update, we do have what I think was a fairly helpful graphic that visually shows how the payback periods are different in terms of those two setups. And so Figure 1 shows customer payback under rate schedule 1289 visually. And in that Figure 1, you can see the initial cost the customer spends on their system in beige. And you can see that beige bar slowly being taken up by the purple bar, which represents the savings from being able to offset their consumption. And then figure 2 shows the payback under rate schedule 2289. Again, you can see that beige bar, which is the cost. There is then a green bar, which symbolizes the rebate, and then that same purple bar showing the value of the energy price. And so I think that's a fairly effective visual to demonstrate the payback periods under both of the rate schedules.
Great. Cool. I appreciate the fullness of your answer there, but I will say, as someone who does this for a living, explaining net metering takes about 3 seconds. Explaining net billing such that people's eyes don't glaze over is significantly harder. Anyways, I don't want to belabor the point on that, but thank you very much for the clarification. I do have a couple of very quick questions on the netting interval. Net billing is proposed to be implemented with an instantaneous interval, correct?
Yes.
Okay. However, Dunsky did not perform their assessment of net billing using instantaneous netting, correct?
Yes, they did do it with instantaneous netting.
They did.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Maybe I missed it, but I never saw those results. And in fact, even Mr. Sanvi said earlier that they even didn't use hourly when they were doing their assessment for net billing. Am I misunderstanding something?
Yes, so a couple of different issues there. So what I was referring to earlier when I said that Dunsky didn't use hourly was when they're looking at the energy value, they're having to look at basically how granular they get in terms of valuing that energy in terms of its exposure to the wholesale market. And they had choices to make in terms of how granular they got there on the valuation. And they couldn't go as granular as hourly due to data limitations. That was that issue. That is different than instantaneous netting. Instantaneous netting is simply when a customer is generating and injecting generation into the grid. There's a policy choice to be made with regards to net billing in terms of, do we go instantaneous, which means that every kilowatt hour is injected into the grid, we're going to value that at the energy price, or do we go, for example, hourly, in which case we would still be recording the instantaneous injection into the grid, but we would then be able to look at that over the course of an hour and net it off against the consumption and value it that way.
Okay, and this might be more of a question for Dunsky when they're up, but I am not aware of any commercially available software that actually models our instantaneous netting. So I would like to get, maybe you can pass the question along to them or get them prepared, that it would be very interesting to know how they actually modeled that and to provide a little bit more information on how their modeling was done.
Yes, I think we'll leave that for the Dunsky panel.
Great, thank you. And with that, I will pass it over to my very last colleague, Sean, to ask a couple more questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Unger.
I believe Sean had said he didn't have any questions, Steve, but if the panel is willing to entertain just one more question for me, I have one more for Mr. Sanvi that came out of the questioning from Mr. Unger. May I ask another question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Chris, you were mentioning that in your customer surveys that there was some sentiment among customers that if they were in self-generation, they'd prefer to see a lower price, but have access to a rebate. Is that did I understand correctly?
That's correct.
Yeah. Can you tell me the date that survey was done?
I should be able to. Just give us one moment here. Yes, so that would have been our May 2024 survey. And the reference I was referring to, I think we talk about, oh, sorry, apologies. I might have been looking at the wrong reference there. Hold on one moment. I should have been more sure. Oh, yeah, now I have it here. So it is still the May 2024 survey. And if you refer to pages 3-32 and 3-33 of Chapter 3 of Exhibit B1, the rate design application, you'll see the results I was referring to.
Yes, thank you. So that was May 2024. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So what was the date of BC Hydro's evidentiary update where the value of solar that would be paid for surplus energy was actually spelled out and made known to the public?
That would have been March 2025.
Okay, so what you're saying is the survey where customers said they'd be happy to see a lower price with a rebate, that survey was conducted before customers would really have had any idea what value would have been applied to their surplus energy.
That's correct. In this case, really what we were trying to ascertain through the survey was really more conceptual. You're correct that we did not know the energy price at that time, and the survey did not discuss the energy price.
So is it fair to say that you might get a more relevant answer to such a survey if it was conducted again now that customers know what the energy valuation will be?
Apologies, Ms. Cho was just correcting me. In fact, in the May 2024 survey, Ms. Cho reminded me that we did, and members of the net metering working group may recall this, we did at the time have a preliminary number we were looking at of 9.17 cents based on BC Hydro's internal analysis. And Ms. Cho is advising me that number was shared in the survey.
Right, but that wasn't made official until the May 2025 evidentiary update. The firm price wasn't made official till then. Is that correct?
That's right. So we would have shared 9.17 cents in the survey, and we would have proposed 10 cents in the evidentiary update approximately 10 months later.
Okay, thank you. Unless Mr. McCauley has any other questions, I'm finished. Thank you very much.
No, I think we're done. Thanks to my colleagues and to the panel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Bear, before we move to someone else, I might just ask one question that's swimming around in my head. And it's when you've read all this evidence and then you have all the other things you read in your life or talk to other people. So what I'm trying to do here is to sort out whether I read this in evidence or whether it's something I've heard somewhere else. When Mr. Giudici, hope I got that right, was talking to you about the average price at Mid-C, I used to hear about people saying, well, hydro mostly over the last 15 years is trying to buy at Mid-C when, and it's mostly works out. Maybe it's sometimes when wind is blowing at night and there could be a really low price, but otherwise it's when the sun is shining in California, because that's what's going to drive the lowest prices at that time. So is what I'm saying, and that would imply that if you're also trying to value solar that you generate in British Columbia at that time, then you've got a challenge in terms of what is the value of that solar, but that's on the hourly basis. So is what I'm saying make no sense whatsoever, or it's a follow-up to Mr. Giudice's question. Thanks.
Yes, no, I think it makes sense to me. So I think I'd make a couple points. First, in terms of BC Hydro trying to purchase at Mid-C at optimal times, I think that is generally true. Obviously, we would want to do that to maximize value for ratepayers. I think in the year that Mr. Deguchi was referring to, because of the drought and because of the volume of energy that BC Hydro needed to purchase, our ability to optimize in that regard was quite limited. We basically had to be buying quite frequently because of the volume that was needed. In terms of whether solar in California, if indeed BC Hydro is able to purchase it at whether it be 3-4 cents per kilowatt hour, should then dictate the value of solar here in terms of the price we're paying customers under the rate schedules. I think that's certainly an argument folks can make. that would not be BC Hydro's view. What we have proposed, as I say, is that we base it on our long-run marginal cost because it's being built into our long-term resource planning.
Thank you. Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just before moving to the next party on the order of cross-examination, I recall just before the afternoon break, EcoSmart had raised a potential question. Was there still something?
Yeah, yeah, we had left one question hanging because, Chris, you asked the reference for it. I was referring to B15, page 658 in the PDF. That is a quote which you've drawn from Dunsky that has to do with generating facilities having no load in most cases. And I was just wanting to ask you to confirm that. So that shared generating facility will have no load in most cases. Is that correct? And that's taken directly from your quote of the Dunsky work that's contained on page 658, the PDF page, on page in document B15. Do you want to just quickly check that?
Thank you. I don't think any of us have that in front of us here in paper copy, but I think we're trying to get it electronically. I just want to make sure I have it in front of me before responding. Yes, so this is actually a response that Dunsky provided, although certainly BC Hydro accepts the response and we don't quibble with it. And so yes, what Dunsky was saying in their response is that based on what they have observed in other jurisdictions where there is community solar, that the vast majority of community solar projects typically do not have on-site load. And that certainly is a model that has been talked about in this proceeding, and it's a model that we've contemplated in our community generation service rates. We've also contemplated, as our evidence discusses, a model where there is on-site load. Example of that being, for example, a strata that would have common load that would be with that generating facility. Certainly understand from Dunsky's advice that that model is less common, but our rate as proposed contemplates both, and we would hope to see both.
Next, in the order of cross-examination for this panel is the Zone 2 Ratepayers Group, and I believe their counsel will also be appearing virtually.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you okay.
Perfect. My name is Heather Mackey, counsel for Zone 2 Ratepayers Group, which I'll be referring to throughout my cross as Zone 2. Apologies for not being there in person due to a series of flight cancellations, but hopefully the last cross of the day is not any more painful being virtual rather than in person. I am going to begin by asking questions that relate to the non-integrated area and constraints and barriers that NIA communities face with respect to participating in net metering and how the proposed changes within this application may impact those barriers. I do believe these questions are best suited for this panel. However, if the panel believes that these questions are best suited for the second panel, please let me know. But until then, I'll proceed. I will direct you first to Exhibit B4, which is BC Hydro's response to Zone 2's IR 1.9.2, which is page 311 of the PDF.
Just one moment, I think we'll need to bring that one up. Yes, we have it now.
Okay, I see that someone has their hand raised. I'm not sure if they...
Yes, my apologies, Ms. Mackey. Could you please repeat that reference?
IR 1.9.2 in Exhibit B4, which is page 311. So this was filed in the 2024 rate design application.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So in the last paragraph, BC Hydro states, in general, advancing diesel reduction in NIA communities requires new clean energy generation, whether customer self-generation or utility scale generation, to be integrated into the overall NIA microgrid. As many of the NIA microgrids are currently constrained, early applications are important so that BC Hydro can work with customers and stakeholders to address any barriers. What does BC Hydro mean when it says that NIA microgrids are currently constrained?
Yes, I'll preface this by saying this is a bit outside of my area of expertise, but I'll do my best. My understanding is that the 14 non-integrated area microgrids, because they are isolated and not connected to the broader BC Hydro integrated system, there are some more acute challenges potentially when it comes to integrating different generation into those systems. And so when projects are brought forward, whether they're more customer scale or utility scale, typically the process involved there can be more complex and challenging than it may be on the integrated system, where BC Hydro just simply has more ability to manage the implications of that generation. And so, as we say in that response, what we've been encouraging parties to do to try and address that is to come to us early when they have proposals, so that we can engage early and work through what those impacts may be and how to address them.
The IR response also says that many of the NIA microgrids are currently constrained. Do you mean that are all 14 NIA microgrids that you referred to considered constrained? Or if not, how many are considered constrained?
I don't have that information myself.
Do you agree that these type of constraints experienced in the NIA are not present in the integrated system?
Yes, I think that's true in the sense of what I said a moment ago, in that the challenges I think we're referencing in that response are due to the isolated nature of those grids, and that would not be a challenge that the integrated system would experience. Yes.
Do these constraints have any impact on net metering participation in the NIA?
Potentially, yes. What I'm thinking of there is, and I don't know if this is a situation that has occurred, but conceptually what I would say is that certainly if a customer is looking to install self-generation, and if there were constraints that would result in challenges for that customer generation to be installed because of the isolated nature of that microgrid, then yes, potentially that would be a challenge that that customer would face that perhaps would not be faced by a customer on the integrated system.
Are the changes proposed within this net metering application expected to have any impact, mitigate, or remove these constraints?
I don't think they will. In this proceeding specifically, I think we're focused on the compensation mechanism and value for generation injected into the grid. I do know that BC Hydro has other initiatives and programs underway in which we're looking at addressing challenges in the non-integrated area around reliability, around constraints. But in this proceeding, no, I wouldn't say that our proposals are aimed at those issues.
I'll have you keep a place mark for your current IR because I will turn back to it in a minute. But I'll briefly turn next to BC Hydro's response to Zone 2's IR 2.2.4, which is Exhibit B29, page 190 of the PDF.
We're just pulling that one up as well.
Sure.
I believe so. B29. Thank you. Yes, I think we have that one now.
So there, BC Hydro lists a number of barriers that Indigenous communities and NIA communities face to participating in solar rebates. On the next page, BC Hydro cites to this same response when answering IR 2.3.1, so that's on page 191, where Zone 2 asked for a list of barriers that NIA face in participating in self-generation. So as a matter of clarification, are NIA barriers to participating in solar rebates the same as barriers to participating in self-generation and net metering?
Yes, I'm just reviewing the list that we have there, but I would say that's fair. So some of the barriers that we cite in that IR response with regards to rebate barriers are factors such as making connections with certified installers, availability of contractors, the electrical infrastructure and upgrades that are needed before being able to install. And I think those would all be examples of things that would apply both to the rebates and the rate.
Specifically with respect to the barrier of obtaining funding that will cover significant project costs, which Indigenous communities face, can you please explain specifically how that barrier impacts Indigenous communities with respect to participating in self-generation?
I think what that's referring to is that often in the non-integrated areas, the project costs can be greater than they might be for the integrated system due to the remoteness, for example, of some of these microgrids. And so that does contribute to higher costs. And so certainly I'm aware of cases where communities have expressed to BC Hydro that they may have a project they wish to undertake, but because of the remoteness of the community, they do face significant cost barriers in terms of making that project economic to proceed with.
And these cost barriers, just to confirm, are not generally present in the integrated area?
I think it would depend on what they are, but with regards to the example I just gave of remoteness, I would say yes, that's correct.
Are there any further barriers that you would add to those listed in IR 2.2.4 that NIA communities face to participating in solar generation?
Off the top of my head, no. I would say I don't think we meant that list to be exhaustive, so I certainly wouldn't be trying to say that those are the only barriers. But off the top of my head, I think the list there is fairly comprehensive in my view, but there may be others.
Will BC Hydro undertake to confirm if there's any other barriers to be listed in IR 2.2.4?
I'm not sure that would add much. I mean, I think happy to take the point that there are many barriers, and I think we've done put it forward an effort here to itemize ones that we're aware of. I'm not sure what adding additional ones examples would add.
Sure, understood. Essentially, what I'm trying to understand, and I think you've already answered this, but I think this is important just to clarify for the record as well, is do you anticipate that the proposed changes within this net metering application will address or mitigate any of the barriers to participating in net metering that NIA and NIA Indigenous communities currently face?
So I would say that I think our hope would be that the community generation service rate does help non-integrated areas in terms of uptake of distributed solar generation. I think we would be very pleased as BC Hydro if there were community generators in the non-integrated areas that were able to take up that rate, and we would hope to see that. In terms of some of the barriers in this IR response we've been referencing, and so forth, I would say no, the proposals in this proceeding do not address those. But I would say nor would I think it would be appropriate for them to, in the sense that we're really trying to put forward a rate proposal in this proceeding. There are other mechanisms that BC Hydro has to address issues such as contractor challenges, and we do, through our energy management group, work with non-integrated area communities to look at how we can address those types of challenges through program supports and other means.
I'll turn back to Exhibit B4. which is Zone 2 IR 1.9.2 that we were on before, page 11 of Exhibit B4, or sorry, page 311.
Yes.
So in that IR, Zone 2 asked BC Hydro whether any of the changes in BC Hydro's net metering proposal may create barriers, such as project economics, delays in meeting targets, etc., for new net metering projects as part of the forthcoming NIA strategy. BC Hydro responded that the extent to which the changes in this application increase or decrease the project economics for customer self-generation will depend in part on the price of excess generation, which will be considered in BC Hydro's forthcoming submission. Is BC Hydro able to please answer this IR now in light of the evidentiary update and proposed energy price of excess generation, specifically in relation to NIA communities that rely solely on diesel?
Yes. So I think our response to that information request, now bearing in mind the proposed energy price of 10 cents per kilowatt hour, would be that if you were to consider the solar rebate alongside that proposal, that we would not expect an impact to project economics, and that's based on the figures I shared earlier of the average payback periods being generally the similar, 19.2 under status quo, 18.8 under our proposals with the rebate. Without the rebate, yes, there would be an impact to economics from a customer perspective.
Now, I'll get to some questions about the payback period in a minute, but to confirm, when we're talking about the solar rebate, is this the same solar rebate that would apply to the NIA as the integrated system?
There's a separate rebate offer for the NIA communities. I don't have the details with me, but they are richer than the ones that the integrated area customers are getting.
So is Chris's response then to be replace the solar rebate? He was referring to the solar rebate applicable to NIA communities, and that with that solar rebate, it would not create new barriers?
So the figures I referenced were with regards to the solar rebate for the integrated area. So I appreciate the correction in that regard, that as Ms. Cho says, there is a different rebate for the NIA. That rebate, the incentives are greater. And so I don't think we have those data points with us, but given the rebate is greater, then I think it would logically follow that 18.8 payback period would be better with consideration of that rebate.
I'm wondering if BC Hydro could just undertake to take a look at the NIA solar rebate and just confirm their response and with respect to Zone 2's IR 1.9.2?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. So still on Exhibit B4, we can turn to BC Hydro's response to Zone 2's IR 1.9.1, which is just the earlier page, page 130. There, we see that as of March 31st, 2024, there were 33 RS 1289 customers in the NIA, all with solar generating facilities. In BC Hydro's experience in NIA First Nation communities, is it the Indigenous government that typically seeks to participate in self-generation, or is it participation through individual customers?
I'm not aware of that myself.
Will BC Hydro be able to undertake to confirm the number of individual versus Indigenous governing body participants in solar rebates and self-generation in the NIA?
Yes, we could do that.
I'd also like to confirm, of the 16 net metering customers in the residential class shown in IR 1.9.1, and this might also be undertaking, but how many of those residential customers were individual customers?
I don't have knowledge of that myself, but I think we could cover that off in the same undertaking.
I'll turn next to Zone 2 IR 2.3.2, which is Exhibit B29, page 192 of Exhibit B29.
Apologies, my PDF navigating skills aren't as good as Ms. Thompson's.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wish I brought handouts.
Could you repeat the PDF page number if you have it?
192.
We're there.
So there, BC Hydro states that since the NIA CREO offer was published in November 2023, BC Hydro has received more than 60 applications to participate in the solar rooftop net metering service across the NIAs. This is an increase over the number of applications prior to November 2023, which indicates continued interest in participating in the solar rooftop net metering service after the CREO offer was published. What I would like to confirm is how many of these 60 applicants were Indigenous governing bodies and how many of these applicants related to residential houses.
I think we could provide that as part of the same undertaking.
Thank you. Do you agree that First Nation NIA communities may have different reasons for participating in net metering than individual residential customers in the integrated area?
Yes, I think so.
So, for example, some First Nation NIA communities are seeking energy sovereignty or reduction in GHG emissions through diesel.
Yes.
And also some First Nations may be seeking broader community plans or lower energy bills.
Yes.
Participation in net metering is also significantly lower in the NIA than the integrated area. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is this due to the number of barriers discussed that face NIA communities with respect to participation?
Yes, I think that would certainly be one of the factors.
So I'll turn next to Zone 2's IR 2.2.2. That's the same exhibit, just page 188 of B29.
We're there.
You're improving. So BC Hydro confirmed that a total of 2 net metering projects in the NIA were funded through rebates in fiscal 2025. Both of these projects were with Indigenous governing bodies, not individual customers. And so, from my understanding, there were 0 individuals participating in solar rebates in the NIA in fiscal 2025. Is that correct?
Yes.
So in comparison, over 3,000 projects were funded through rebates in fiscal 2025 in the integrated area. From your perspective, does this information suggest that net metering participation is increasing in the NIA?
I think as part of the undertaking we've referenced, we could certainly provide what the uptake of the net metering rate has been since our initial response, where we indicated 33 customers were signed up. And so I think we could indicate what the growth has been since then and perhaps provide a characterization of our views in that regard as part of that undertaking. I don't have the sign up numbers in front of me, so I wouldn't be in a position to do that here.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thank you. I will move on then to IR 2.3.1. So that's just page 191 of the same exhibit.
Okay.
There, BC Hydro states that it anticipates more future participation in net metering from NIA customers, but it does not have specific forecasts on the number of customers or capacity of future self-generation or community generation projects in the NIA. This might be coupled into the prior undertaking, but I just wanted to confirm what BC Hydro's basis was for anticipating increased participation in self-generation following the filing of the net metering evidentiary update.
I think the basis of our expectation in that regard is that we are aware that communities continue to have an interest in self-generation in the NIA, and so we expect that as a result of that interest, we'll continue to see applications. I think that was the nature of our statement there.
Does BC Hydro anticipate the changes specifically within this application will increase participation or impact participation in the net metering program in the NIA?
With regards to specifically in this proceeding, so if we are putting the rebates aside, then I would say adopting net billing with an energy price of 10 cents as compared to net metering certainly does have an impact on customer economics that could decrease participation.
Is there anything that BC Hydro might be doing to counteract the risk of decreased participation due to the changes within this proposal?
Yes, so I think the rebates, while they were something that we were looking at already and not something we did because of the proposal to adopt net billing, but I think the rebates are something that we hope will help with adoption of self-generation, whether it be in the integrated area or the NIAs. What I would also say more generally is I know that there is a very focused effort within BC Hydro today to look at diesel reduction in the NIAs more generally, and to make sure that we're advancing efforts on a variety of fronts to advance diesel reduction in the NIAs.
And to confirm that will be separate from this proceeding?
That's correct.
My next questions will relate to the proposed transition period for current net metering customers and the payback period. So I understand BC Hydro is seeking approval for, among other things, a transition period for existing net metering service rate customers who did not receive BC Hydro's solar rebate to stay on RS 1289 for a period of 20 years from the customer's net metering service date. Is that correct?
Yes.
So BC Hydro's position is that this proposed transition period will protect the payback period for existing net metering customers, and that this proposal aligns with the average 19.2 year payback period for existing net metering customers, correct?
Yes.
How does BC Hydro calculate the payback period for net metering installations?
So I'll refer you to our BC Hydro's response to BCO APO RCIA IR 1.17.1, where we do lay out all of the calculations. And sorry, that was in Exhibit B13.
Okay, I appreciate it. And so I guess, and apologies for I don't have that in front of me, but I just wanted to confirm one quick detail is whether BC Hydro's calculation of the payback period includes costs of building upgrades needed for the renewable system to be installed.
Can you clarify what you mean by building upgrades?
So for example, some houses, some buildings may need to be upgraded before net metering can be installed. So that might be roof upgrades. And I believe it was IR 2.2.4 where BC Hydro referred to specifically this is an additional cost that might be added to the buildings in the NIA because they're a bit older. So I'm wondering if those upgrades would be included in the calculation of the payback period.
So perhaps we'll take an undertaking to determine that, because we have in that IR laid out that we use $2,845 per kilowatt as the installation cost, and that comes from energyhub.org, but we're not sure if it includes those upgrade costs. So let us take that away.
Great, I appreciate it. And I would just add if BC Hydro could undertake to provide sample calculations of the payback period for the NIA as compared to the integrated area for both rate schedules, so 1289 and 2289, and each with the applicable solar rate, including any assumptions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, can you clarify if you would like us to do that for the average NIA customer or just using average residential across BC?
For the average NIA customer, and then if possible to compare it to the payback calculation for the average integrated area.
Sure, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I think we confirmed previously or earlier that the projects to implement solar generation are typically more expensive in the NIA than the integrated area. One of the reasons being the remoteness of the communities. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Does BC Hydro have an estimate of the average increased cost to install rooftop solar in the NIA as compared to the integrated area?
We don't.
Could this be potentially addressed in the prior undertaking as well?
Yes, I think we can look to see if we have data on that, and if so, we will include it in that undertaking.
So we'll put that aside, and just hypothetically, if the cost of building upgrades needed for a renewable system to be installed, if that would impact BC Hydro's calculation of the payback period. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If the cost of building upgrades were included in the calculation of the payback period, that would impact it and potentially increase it. Is that correct?
If those costs were already included in the average cost that we have put forward, then no, it would have no impact. But if they didn't, then yes, those average costs would go up.
I guess to clarify, so if the average costs were used in the integrated area, but we added the average costs from the NIA, then the payback period would be increased. Is that correct?
If the average cost in the NIA were larger, yes, they would increase.
Okay. Would I be correct in saying that a longer payback period could be another barrier to installing solar in NIA communities?
Yes, I think that's fair.
So if the NIA payback period is greater in the NIA than the integrated area, how will the proposed changes within this net metering application reduce the payback period in the NIA to be equal to the integrated zone?
I think I would make a couple points with regard to that. First is, as we've talked about, and I think as our undertaking will detail, there is a rebate for the NIA that's intended to address some of these considerations. So we'll share those details in our undertaking. The second, in terms of whether it should be an objective of the proposals in this proceeding to achieve payback period parity, if I can put it that way, between the integrated system and the non-integrated areas. One of the issues that we have explored in our evidence in response to inquiries from the Zone 2 ratepayer group is that, as the panel may recall, we recently, as part of the same application, actually the 2024 rate design application, we proposed the elimination of higher non-integrated area rates. And so BC Hydro's position would be that if we are going to provide the same retail rates to the non-integrated area customers as integrated area customers, despite the non-integrated area having a higher cost of service, then that same treatment should apply in this case, where although it may be true that there are higher costs for the non-integrated area when it comes to customer generation, because from a retail rate perspective, we are treating the integrated area and the non-integrated area the same. Our position would be that from a compensation for customer generation perspective, we should also be treating the integrated area and the non-integrated area the same.
So I think that aligns with what you said in Exhibit 32, which you also stated today is your opening statement. And so BC Hydro's objective within this proposal is that all customers with self-generation will be treated equally and fairly. Is that correct?
I think the objective of the transition period we proposed is to make sure that on average, the customer payback period is protected. I think we recognize that individual customers may have payback periods that are shorter or longer than 20 years. And by choosing 20 years as the transition proposal, we're trying to put forward a quantum that generally will make sure that on average customers are kept whole. But I think we recognize that there are customers within that may be kept a little bit more than whole, and there are customers within that may not be kept quite whole, depending on their individual circumstances.
So I won't belabor the point, but I'll just have one final question on this. So it's Exhibit B8, which is BC Hydro's evidentiary update at page 28. So BC Hydro submits that an energy price of 10 cents per kilowatt hour for all net generation will maintain the same estimated customer payback period as RS 1289 when considered in combination with BC Hydro's recently introduced solar rebate. So just to make it super clear, is it BC Hydro's perspective that this is also true for customers in the NIA?
I think as part of the undertaking we referenced earlier, we could include information with regards to the NIA specifically. I think with regards to the passage you mentioned, and I know we've explored this in information request responses, we do state that it is the same average customer payback period. So again, I think we acknowledge that from an individual customer perspective, there may be variations and there may be individual customers that are better off under BC Hydro's proposals. There may be cases where customers are worse off, but on average, our expectation would be that the customer payback period is maintained.
And that variation that you've just described, in your view, does this align with the theme of customer fairness outlined in your opening statement this morning?
I think it does. I think as I've talked about during the course of today, we're trying to weigh different considerations. And so there's a cost to our transition proposal of $41 million. That's certainly not an insignificant figure. That cost will be paid by other ratepayers. That transition proposal, in our view, is facilitating a broader cost shifting reduction. Are there measures that BC Hydro could take to further enhance that transition proposal? Perhaps there are, but that would put upward pressure on that 41 million. And in our view, I think the proposal of maintaining the payback period on average is a considerable step in terms of transition. Certainly, as other interveners have pointed out, a step that goes beyond what we have done in other rate design proceedings.
So I'll turn very briefly just to the topic of the value of solar. These maybe, I think this is proper for this panel, but let me know if not. So specifically Exhibit B29, Zone 2 IR 2.4.4, which is page 199 of the PDF. Dunsky states, or I'll wait.
Yes, we're there.
So I understand this is Dunsky's evidence, but I just have a few clarifying questions. So Dunsky states that because BC Hydro applies a uniform provincial rate structure and develops avoided cost data at the bulk system level, the assessment represents a system-wide average value of solar, not regional or microgrid specific valuations. So just a clarifying question, when he says system-wide, he's referring to the average of the integrated system-wide, right? Not an average of the integrated and system and microgrids together?
I think since this is Dunsky's response, I would defer to them to speak to what their words were referring to there. Certainly that seems logical to me, but I don't want to speak for them in terms of their answer.
Sure. So BC Hydro did not include in its project scope request to Dunsky that it conduct a jurisdictional review of net metering microgrids prior to this application. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Perhaps a quick point of clarification. What I would say is that with regards to the value of solar and cost shifting study that Dunsky conducted, BC Hydro did not issue instructions to Dunsky per se. What happened more was that we were made aware. Or I should back up. I think there was a suggestion from the net metering working group that it would be helpful to obtain an independent consultant to do a value of cost shifting analysis. We agreed with that suggestion. We sought out consultants that could do that work. Dunsky was made aware to us, both because our energy management group was already working with them on their solar adoption study, also because Mr. Rabago, the consultant that Community Solar is working with, had recommended Dunsky to us. And so we approached Dunsky and said, we hear that you do this kind of work. Could you do it for us? And could you tell us what it would look like? And Dunsky sent us a proposed scope, and we instructed them to proceed on that basis.
So on that basis, I think any other questions would be for Dunsky. So appreciate that clarification. As a final topic, I would just ask a few questions regarding the NIA and net metering within the context of BC Hydro's draft strategy for non-integrated areas. In doing so, I'll be referring to the witness aid that was circulated prior, which is BC Hydro's draft NIA strategy, July 27th distribution version.
Yes, I have that.
And if I might just jump in briefly, Mr. Chair, I would ask that the hearing officer just distribute that document to other participants in the hearing so that they have access to it as well. So she will do that now. Thank you.
So if you can just hold your questions just for a minute.
Sure. Thank you.
Does everyone have it? We're good? Okay, I think you can go ahead with your questions.
Great, thank you. So I will be brief with this, but just a few background items. Do you agree that reducing reliance on diesel generation, developing clean resources, and gaining energy self-sufficiency are goals within BC Hydro's draft NIA strategy?
Yes.
Rooftop solar and BC Hydro's net metering program are part of the draft NIA strategy strategic goal of implement demand-side management programs. Is that correct?
Yes, they're part of the strategy. In terms of whether they're part of that particular goal, I'll take your word for that, but I don't have it in front of me. It may be in here somewhere, but I'm not finding it right away.
No, my apologies. That would be on page 12.
I believe, did you say it's part of the implement demand side management programs?
Yes.
Goal? I'm not seeing a reference to net metering here. Again, I'm happy to take your word for it. I don't have any reason to quibble with it, but I'm not seeing it in front of me immediately.
Sure. Yeah, it's not. It's just a background question. We won't spend too much time on it. So essentially, what I understand is that demand side management aims to reduce electricity usage in the NIA, to reduce reliance on diesel, and to alleviate constraints on microgrids. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
So I also understand that BC Hydro is currently working on revising the draft NIA strategy following engagement with First Nations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Will BC Hydro undertake to file a copy of the final or most recent version of the draft NIA strategy if that copy is not the most final version?
I believe this copy is the most recent version, but yes, if there's a more recent version, we can file that, or alternatively, we can advise that or confirm that this is the most recent version.
Thank you. I'd like you to please turn to page 18 of the witness aid.
Okay.
And I direct your attention to the highlighted portion of the second paragraph, which begins within the non-integrated areas. There are specific challenges. Do you see that?
Yes.
So it goes on to talk about specific challenges because of the small size of the grids and the need to manage power quality. And so historically, we've limited the use of net metering in the non-integrated areas to manage these challenges. As part of this strategy, we are piloting small-scale solar installations in non-integrated area communities that will help us learn more about how to address these challenges and best design net metering offerings in the non-integrated areas so that more customers can benefit from this opportunity.
Yes.
So having conducted these small-scale solar projects, are any of the learnings or anything that BC Hydro learned from those projects, were they added or reflected in this current proposed changes within this application?
I don't think so. I think the reason for that would be that really what we're looking at through the proposals in this proceeding is the compensation mechanism and the appropriate level of compensation for energy delivered to BC Hydro from customers. I think what is being referred to in the highlighted paragraph there is more about the challenges on the microgrids in terms of integrating that generation and how we might be able to address those challenges. That I think would not really be a rate design matter. That would be more a matter in terms of how those systems are designed and operated and whether there's opportunities there to do that differently or better.
Does BC Hydro anticipate that the changes, and again, I apologize if you've answered this, but to make it clear for the record, will the changes proposed within this net metering application further the goal of implementing demand-side management programs in the NI strategy as compared to the existing net metering program?
In terms of furthering demand-side management programs, I would say that we wouldn't characterize the rates in this proceeding as demand-side management programs. That the rebates really are what's targeted at that demand-side reduction. But perhaps more generally in terms of whether the proposals in this proceeding are advancing the uptake of distributed solar in the NIAs. I guess a couple of quick points. I think we've mentioned previously, our hope would be that the community generation service rate would do that and open up some new opportunities there. And then I think we've talked previously about the impact on customer economics in that regard as well.
I'd like to ask that the Commission please add BC Hydro's draft strategy on the NIA this July 17th distribution version as Exhibit C1413.
Is the panel happy to have this marked as an exhibit?
Sure.
This document is now marked as Exhibit C14-13.
As a final direction, I'll direct you to Exhibit B29, which is BC Hydro's response to Zone 2's IR 2.3.5, which is page 195 of the PDF.
Okay, we're there.
So there, BC Hydro states that when considered alongside BC Hydro's solar rebate, its proposed self-generation service rate and community generation service rate is expected to result in increased energy production, which in turn is expected to decrease the diesel generation, specifically in NIA communities that are powered by solely by diesel generation. What is the basis for concluding that the proposed rate schedule will result in increased energy production?
Yes, so the basis for that statement is something I referred to in my opening statement, which is that when Dunsky did their solar adoption study, they looked at the incentive program scenario, as well as a sensitivity that took into account our net injection limit, and then a forecast around our community generation service rate. If you add all those up, you get to a forecast in 2043 of 1,750 gigawatt hours of energy. And that is greater than if you look at the business as usual scenario, which is about 750 gigawatt hours less than that. So that was the basis for that statement.
And as a final point, just with respect to the reference to community generation service rate, I believe you had mentioned earlier that you were hoping or expecting that community generation will be located in NIA communities. I just wanted to confirm whether BC Hydro did expect future community generation in NIA communities and the basis for that expectation.
Yes, so we would certainly hope that that is the case. One of the models that we have in mind for community generation, as we've talked about in our evidence, is models such as a First Nation undertaking community generation and perhaps making that generation available to their members as subscribers. So that would be an example of a model that we certainly would be very pleased if there's uptake on the community generation service rate in that regard in the non-integrated areas.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. I see it's getting rather late. Mr. Bear, what do you advise me?
Well, that concludes the interveners who've indicated that they wish to cross-examine this BC Hydro witness panel. BCUC staff will have some questions. I'd estimate probably 45 minutes to an hour. In light of the time, I doubt I'll be able to finish before 5 o'clock, so I might suggest it might make sense to leave a little early today, and we could start with that in the morning if that works for the panel.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea as we get ourselves back used to this process. So sorry, panel, that means you will have to come back tomorrow morning. But are there any other issues that anyone needs to raise before we close up for today? We'll start again tomorrow at 8:30, I'm presuming. Any other issues? Yes? Mr. Bear, I'll let you answer those questions, or staff.
I would suggest you take any of your possessions home tonight. I don't know if the room will be secured, so I'd suggest you bring it with you.
Yeah. Fair question, though. Any others of that nature? Administrative, whatever? Seeing none, I'll thank the panel. I'll thank all the questioners and the people online, and commission staff, of course, and our technical people. Congratulations. And so we're adjourned until 8:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you, everyone.